This is 3L Podcast, created by Listen Cloud.
Listen, learn, level up.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe, and welcome to the very first episode of Mindful Living, brought to you by Listen Cloud, the podcast where we uncover the hidden truths behind the choices we make every day. Today, we're starting strong with a topic that might surprise you. It's called the poison hiding in your healthy food.
And I'm Jennifer, and today's episode has a title that might stop you in your tracks: The Poison Hiding in Your Healthy Food.
That's right, you heard that correctly. We're talking about something most of us try to do every day: eat healthy, but there might be a silent threat hiding in the very foods we think are good for us.
We're talking about pesticides, chemicals that are used to grow our food, protect it from bugs, and make it look fresh and beautiful on store shelves. But behind that shiny apple or that perfectly green spinach leaf, there could be something much more sinister.
When we say poison, it's not to be dramatic. Many pesticides are literally designed to kill living organisms. That's their job, to stop pests from ruining crops. But the real question is, if it can kill a bug, what can it do to us?
Exactly. And this isn't some conspiracy theory. There's real science, real data, and real stories behind what we're about to talk about. Whether you're someone who already eats organic or someone who never thought twice about it, this episode is for you.
Because the truth is, this affects all of us. You might eat strawberries thinking they're the healthiest choice, but did you know strawberries top the list of the most pesticide-contaminated fruits?
Or how about that morning toast made from wheat sprayed with glyphosate right before harvest? Even bread, a staple in so many homes, isn't safe from this.
So today we're going to explore what pesticides are, how they get into our food, how they impact our health, and most importantly, what we can do about it.
We'll also share some personal stories, expert insights, and simple steps you can take to protect yourself and your family. Because knowledge is power, and awareness is the first step toward change.
So buckle in, because this might be the most important food conversation you'll hear this year.
Let's uncover the poison hiding in your healthy food.
So Jennifer, let's get into the reality of where pesticides are actually found. Most people might think they only exist on apples or in a commercial farm's field. But the truth is way more widespread, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. Pesticides are present in so many things we eat every single day: fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, even things like coffee and tea. And the worst part is that many of these foods are what we consider healthy.
Right, it's ironic, really. You try to eat a salad to be good to your body, but unless it's organic, that lettuce might be carrying a chemical cocktail.
Exactly. Take strawberries, for example. As we mentioned earlier, they're consistently at the top of the Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen list. A single strawberry can carry residues of multiple pesticides. And we're not talking trace amounts, Joe. We're talking measurable, consistent exposure.
And it's not just strawberries. Spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes. The list goes on. These are the foods we tell people to eat for better health, and yet they're the most contaminated.
One that shocks a lot of people is oatmeal. Oats are often sprayed with glyphosate, a controversial weed killer, right before harvesting. That means even your so-called clean breakfast might not be as clean as you think.
And let's not forget about wheat. Most conventional wheat in the U.S. is sprayed with glyphosate to dry it out faster before harvest. That means it's baked right into your bread, your pasta, your pastries.
Coffee and tea are also major culprits. Coffee plants are often treated with dozens of pesticides to fight off insects and diseases, especially on large plantations. Unless your beans are certified organic, you could be drinking a cup of chemicals every morning.
And now comes the part that really gets me: baby food. I mean, if there's one thing we all assume is safe, it's food made for babies, right?
I know, Joe, it's heartbreaking. Several independent studies have shown that many commercially available baby foods contain detectable levels of pesticides, heavy metals like lead and arsenic, and other contaminants.
That's outrageous. How can we allow toxins in food that's specifically made for the most vulnerable members of society?
It's infuriating. Babies are developing at a rapid pace. Their organs, their brains, their immune systems, all of it is forming in those early months and years. And we're feeding them food that might harm them in the long run.
I read that in one test, over 90% of baby foods tested contained at least one concerning chemical. Many had more than one. And these weren't fringe brands. We're talking about big names that you see in every supermarket.
Which really brings up the question, if we can't trust the labels, who can we trust? That's why it's so important to become educated as consumers and start asking tougher questions.
So, Jennifer, if it's in our fruits, veggies, grains, and even baby food, is there anywhere that's safe?
That's where awareness comes in. We can't eliminate all exposure, but we can reduce it. Choosing organic when possible, especially for the dirty dozen, washing produce thoroughly, supporting local growers, all these steps help.
It's a scary thought, but it's not hopeless. We have options. We can reclaim some control, but it starts with knowing the problem exists.
Exactly. And that's what this episode is all about. Opening our eyes to where these poisons are hiding so we can make smarter, safer choices every day.
Okay, Jennifer, now that we know how widespread pesticides are in our food, let's talk about what they actually do to our bodies. I think this is the part where things get really personal and really concerning.
Absolutely, Joe. Because it's one thing to know that pesticides are there, but understanding what they do inside us, that's where people really start to pay attention.
Let's start with the short-term effects. What happens if someone is exposed to pesticides in their daily diet or environment, even in small amounts?
Great place to start. Short-term exposure, especially in people who are sensitive or exposed to higher than average levels, can lead to symptoms like headaches, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, and skin or eye irritation. These are often brushed off as just feeling off, but they could be the body reacting to toxins.
I've heard that even something like frequent brain fog could be related to environmental toxins, including pesticides.
Yes, and most people don't connect the dots. But here's the tricky part. Pesticides don't always cause immediate dramatic reactions. Instead, they often build up quietly over time, which leads us into the long-term effects.
This is where it gets serious, right?
Very serious. Long-term pesticide exposure has been linked to some of the most serious health issues we face today. We're talking about cancers, neurological diseases like Parkinson's, reproductive issues, hormone disruption, and even developmental problems in children.
That's a huge list. And the scary thing is, a lot of the studies linking pesticides to these conditions are recent. We're only just beginning to see the full picture.
Exactly. And one of the most disturbing things is how pesticides affect the endocrine system, the system that controls our hormones. Many pesticides are endocrine disruptors. That means they mimic or interfere with the body's natural hormones.
And hormones control everything from growth and metabolism to mood and fertility.
Correct. So when you mess with that system, it's not just one part of the body that's affected, it's the whole body. Fertility issues, thyroid problems, early puberty in kids. The list goes on.
I read about studies that found pesticide exposure linked to lower sperm count in men and hormonal imbalances in women. That's not something you hear about often in mainstream conversations.
No, and it should be. And let's not forget about neurological impacts. There's mounting evidence connecting long-term pesticide exposure with cognitive decline, especially in older adults, and with developmental disorders in children.
Like ADHD and autism spectrum disorders?
Yes. While we can't say pesticides cause those disorders directly, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting they're a contributing factor, especially during critical windows of development.
And for people who work in agriculture, those who handle these chemicals regularly, the risks must be even higher.
Without a doubt, farm workers are among the most affected. They experience higher rates of certain cancers, respiratory issues, and reproductive problems, and they often lack proper protection or healthcare access.
That adds another layer of injustice to this whole issue.
It really does. And while we often focus on the health of the consumer, which is important, we can't ignore the people who grow and harvest our food. They deserve better protection and respect.
One thing I've wondered about is the cumulative effect. Like, what happens when you're exposed to small amounts of multiple pesticides over a lifetime?
That's the million-dollar question, Joe. Scientists call it the cocktail effect. While each chemical might be within legal limits on its own, nobody really knows what happens when they're all mixed together in the human body.
So we're basically part of an uncontrolled experiment?
In many ways, yes, and unfortunately, the regulations haven't kept up with the science. Testing tends to look at single substances in isolation, not the real-world mixture we actually experience.
That's frustrating and honestly kind of scary.
It is, but again, knowledge is power. When we know what these chemicals can do, we can start making choices that reduce our exposure and push for stronger protections.
So to recap, short-term exposure can cause fatigue, headaches, nausea, and long-term exposure can be linked to cancer, hormone problems, fertility issues, neurological disorders, and more.
That's right. And it's not about creating fear. It's about awareness. If we know the risks, we can act smarter.
Couldn't agree more. All right, let's keep going and talk about some of the hidden dangers people don't usually hear about. So, Jennifer, after hearing about all the health concerns and environmental effects, I think a lot of listeners might be wondering the same thing I did. Why are pesticides still so widely used?
It's a question that frustrates a lot of people, Joe. The short answer? Money. Pesticides help maximize profits for large-scale agricultural businesses. They reduce crop losses, make harvesting easier, and keep produce looking clean and marketable.
It's all about the bottom line.
Exactly. From a business perspective, using pesticides makes sense. If a farmer can grow 20% more crops and lose less to insects and disease, that's a huge gain. Especially in a global market where appearance and shelf life often matter more than nutritional value.
That reminds me of something I read about supermarket standards. A lot of fruits and vegetables get rejected not because they're unsafe, but because they have cosmetic blemishes. So growers feel pressured to use chemicals to meet those visual standards.
That's very true. If your apples have spots or your lettuce has holes, they might not sell, even if they're perfectly safe and nutritious. So pesticides become a way to meet demand and reduce waste, but at a cost we're not seeing up front.
And the companies that make these pesticides, the chemical giants, they play a big role in keeping this system in place, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. The agrochemical industry is one of the most powerful in the world. Companies like Bayer, Syngenta, and others spend millions lobbying governments, funding research that supports their products, and influencing public perception.
So it's not just about farming, it's about politics, regulation, and power.
Exactly. And unfortunately, the voices of small farmers, health advocates, and scientists who raise concerns often get drowned out.
And even when a pesticide is shown to be harmful, it's not always banned immediately, is it?
The process is painfully slow. Companies can fight bans with legal action, appeal decisions, and flood regulatory agencies with data that supports continued use. Meanwhile, the public continues to be exposed.
It sounds like a vicious cycle. Farmers rely on pesticides to compete in the market, consumers demand cheap and perfect-looking produce, and corporations keep the system locked in.
That's a perfect summary. It's a system that prioritizes short-term gains over long-term health and sustainability.
So what's the alternative? How do we break out of it?
It starts with consumer awareness. When people demand safer food, support organic products, and vote with their dollars, businesses pay attention. We can also push for policy changes that better support regenerative agriculture and safer practices.
So change is possible, but it takes pressure from both the ground up and the top down.
Yes, it's not an easy fix, but every conversation like this one, moves us closer to a food system that values health over profit.
Let's keep that conversation going. What's next on the list? So, Jennifer, after everything we've discussed, the health risks, the environmental damage, the business interests, what can the average person actually do?
That's the big question, Joe, and the answer isn't do nothing. It's about taking steps that are practical, powerful, and personal. Let's start with washing. A lot of people think washing fruits and vegetables solves the problem.
That's what I always assumed. I mean, you wash your apples, your lettuce, and you're good to go, right?
It helps, but it's not nearly enough. Many pesticides don't just sit on the surface of produce. They penetrate into the skin or flesh. And some are even systemic, meaning they're absorbed into the plant as it grows. Washing with water alone doesn't remove those.
So even if you scrub the heck out of that strawberry, there's still residue inside it?
Exactly. You can reduce surface-level pesticides by using vinegar or baking soda solutions, but that won't eliminate all the chemicals, especially the ones that have seeped in or are used systemically.
That's frustrating. So what's the better option?
Organic produce. I know not everyone can afford to go 100% organic, and that's okay. But even selectively buying organic, especially for the most contaminated items, makes a difference.
You're talking about the dirty dozen, right?
Yes. Focus your organic purchases on those high-risk foods, strawberries, spinach, apples, grapes, and so on. That's where your money has the most impact in terms of reducing pesticide exposure.
And if someone can't access organic produce regularly, what else can they do?
One of the most powerful things? Grow your own food. Even if it's just herbs in a windowsill, a tomato plant on the balcony, or a small backyard garden, it gives you control over what goes into your food, literally.
That's empowering. And honestly, it sounds kind of therapeutic too.
It is. Gardening connects you to your food in a deep, meaningful way. And the more you grow, the less you rely on potentially contaminated supply chains.
What if someone lives in a city with no yard space?
Great question. Community gardens are becoming more popular, and some cities even have public programs where people can rent a plot. Hydroponic systems or vertical planters can also be set up indoors. Where there's a will, there's a way.
So we've got washing, choosing organic strategically, and growing our own. What else?
Advocacy. This is the long game. Support policies that push for transparency in food labeling. Vote for leaders who back regenerative agriculture. Follow organizations that campaign for safer food systems.
It's like voting with your voice, not just your wallet.
Absolutely. And share what you learn. Talk to your friends, your family. These conversations matter. The more people are aware, the more pressure builds to change the system.
And you know what? It doesn't have to be overwhelming. No one's asking for perfection. But small steps, done consistently, can lead to big changes.
Well said. It's not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. Wash smarter. Buy better when you can. Grow what you can. Speak up when it matters.
And together, those small actions add up.
They really do. We don't need a few people doing everything perfectly. We need millions doing it imperfectly but consistently.
Couldn't agree more. Ready to talk about the next big piece of the puzzle?
Let's do it.
You know, Jennifer, sometimes the most powerful motivator for change isn't a study or a headline. It's someone's personal story.
Absolutely. Data is important, but when we connect it to real people, real experiences, that's when things really hit home.
One story that stuck with me came from a farm worker advocacy group. A mother of two in California worked on a strawberry farm for years. She followed every safety procedure she was given: gloves, mask, even washing her clothes separately. But over time, her youngest child started developing respiratory issues and developmental delays. Doctors eventually pointed to pesticide exposure as a possible contributing factor.
That breaks my heart. And unfortunately, she's not alone. According to a 2020 study published in Environmental Health, Children living near agricultural areas, especially within 1 kilometer of pesticide-treated fields, were significantly more likely to experience learning disabilities and behavioral problems.
That study followed nearly 7,000 children over a 10-year period, right?
Exactly. Long-term, large scale. It showed a clear correlation between proximity to pesticides and developmental issues. And it wasn't just rural communities. Pesticide drift can reach into suburban and even urban zones, especially with aerial spraying.
That reminds me of my cousin, actually. She had no known allergies growing up, but during her first year living on her college campus, which happened to be next to a commercial vineyard, she developed chronic migraines and skin rashes. Only when she went home for summer did her symptoms fade. When she returned, they came back. It was only after her doctor started digging that pesticide exposure was identified as a likely cause.
And what's scary is how few doctors are trained to even consider that possibility. Most don't think to ask, could this be environmental?
Exactly. I think if more health professionals were trained in environmental medicine, we'd catch a lot more of these early warning signs.
I want to bring up one more story, this time from a report by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They documented cases of prenatal pesticide exposure affecting newborn health, lower birth weights, early delivery, and increased risk of childhood leukemia.
And these aren't isolated stories. They're backed by peer-reviewed studies, years of data, and hundreds of families experiencing the same things.
That's why we share them, not to scare, but to humanize the statistics. Behind every chart is a child, a parent, a community.
It makes the need for change feel urgent. Because if it can happen to them, it can happen to any of us.
And that's why we're having this conversation. Not just to inform, but to inspire action. We can't afford to treat this like someone else's problem.
Exactly. Let's all be part of the solution. Wow, and what a journey this episode has been. We've gone from hidden chemicals on our plates to deep-rooted systemic issues. If you've made it this far, it means you care. And that's the first and most important step.
Absolutely. We know this topic can feel heavy, but it's also full of hope. Because now you're informed, and informed people change the world. One meal, one vote, one conversation at a time.
Whether it's washing your produce a little more intentionally, choosing organic when you can, planting herbs on your windowsill, or asking your grocery store where their food comes from, every action counts.
You're not powerless. You are a consumer, and that means you have influence. Use it. Share what you've learned today with a friend, your family, your community. The ripple effect is real.
And if this episode made you think, made you feel something, or taught you something new, please do us one favor. Subscribe to our YouTube channel.
We release episodes every week, diving into the hidden layers of everyday life, food, wellness, sustainability, and the human stories behind it all.
You subscribing helps us reach more people, build more awareness, and keep conversations like this alive. Because this isn't just content, it's a movement.
Thank you so much for listening. Take care of yourself, take care of your food, and remember, awareness isn't the end, it's the beginning.
We'll see you in the next episode of Mindful Living. Until then, stay curious and stay conscious.
Bye, everyone.